The revelation came without warning through every communication system in the Empire at exactly the same time. Every military base, every government office, every colony, world, every ship in space received the same transmission simultaneously. Aliens had penetrated their most secure networks and were speaking directly to every citizen of the Empire. The voice that came through the speakers was different from the first transmission. This voice was female and carried authority that seemed to come from experience with power on a scale the Empire could not imagine. "We are not aliens," the voice said with calm certainty. "We are humans, and we have been watching your Empire destroy innocent worlds for far too long. Dr. Lim Young, Su, the Empire." Chief scientist who studied ancient civilizations felt his world collapse around him. He had found references to humans in ruins throughout the galaxy. Strange stories about a species that had appeared briefly among the stars before vanishing completely. He had dismissed these stories as myths and legends told by primitive cultures, but the ruins had not been telling stories. They had been leaving warnings. The ancient civilizations had encountered humans during their early expansion into space, and those encounters had left such powerful impressions that they carved warnings into stone and metal that would last for millions of years. The human transmission continued, and each word hit the Empire leadership like a physical blow. "We are not confined to a single world, as your intelligence reports suggest. We chose isolation while we developed the technologies and capabilities needed to enforce peace in a galaxy filled with species like yours, Admiral Lee Jun." Ho stared at the communication screen and felt everything he thought he knew about galactic politics crumble into dust. The humans had never been primitive or backwards. They had been hiding their true capabilities while they watched and waited and planned. The Empire had dismissed them as insignificant while they were actually the most dangerous species in known space. Your Empire has spent 3 centuries conquering weaker civilizations and enslaving species that could not defend themselves. The human voice continued with the kind of cold anger that promised terrible consequences. "You have murdered billions of innocents and destroyed cultures that were older and more beautiful than you could ever understand." The human fleet commander identified herself as Admiral Sarah Chen, and her words carried the absolute authority of someone who had never been successfully opposed. "We have observed your expansion with growing concern, your treatment of conquered species and your policies toward worlds that resist your rule have convinced us that the time for observation has ended." Emperor Kang Do-hyun listened to this transmission from his palace throne room, surrounded by advisors who looked like they were watching the end of the world. The humans were not asking for negotiations or proposing peace talks. They were delivering an ultimatum with the confidence of beings who had already decided the outcome. "You will immediately cease all military operations against independent worlds." Admiral Chen continued. "You will begin releasing conquered species and returning their territories. You will dismantle your military forces and accept human oversight of your transition to a peaceful civilization." The Emperor stood up from his throne and shouted at the communications screen. "How dare you make demands of the Valian Empire? We have conquered half the galaxy. We are the most powerful civilization that has ever existed. You are nothing but primitives, hiding in a single star system." The response came immediately, and it was not words but a demonstration that showed exactly how wrong the Emperor was. The lights in the palace throne room flickered and died. The gravity generators stopped working for several seconds, leaving everyone floating helplessly in the air. The life support systems shut down completely before restarting with a hum that sounded almost mocking. "We have been inside your most secure facilities for years," Admiral Chen said with casual indifference to the Emperor's rage. "We have mapped your technology, studied your weapons, analyzed your strategies. We could have destroyed your entire civilization at any time we chose, but we preferred to give you the opportunity to change your ways peacefully." The truth was devastating and complete. The humans had not been hiding from the Empire. They had been studying the Empire like scientists examining dangerous animals. The Phantom Fleet had not appeared suddenly. They had been positioned and waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves, Dr. Lim Young. Sue finally understood what the ancient ruins had been trying to tell future generations. The humans were the guardians of the galaxy, the species that emerged periodically to keep aggressive civilizations from destroying everything else. They had been doing this for millions of years, maintaining balance and preventing galactic wars. The Empire's greatest intelligence failure had been dismissing humanity as unimportant. They had focused on expanding their territory and building bigger weapons, while the most dangerous species in the galaxy watched them and prepared to stop them. The humans had allowed the Empire to grow strong enough to be a threat before stepping in to end that threat. Permanently, Admiral. Sarah Chen's final message was delivered with the certainty of someone who had already won. The age of Valian expansion is over. Your empire will be reformed under human guidance, or it will be eliminated entirely. The choice is yours. But the outcome has already been decided. The Emperor realized that his empire faced an enemy that had been preparing for this confrontation longer than the empire had existed. The humans had not been reacting to Empire aggression. They had been allowing it to continue until they were ready to end it. The Phantom Fleet was just the beginning of human capabilities. Everything the Empire had built was now at the mercy of a species they had never taken seriously. The humans had emerged from their long isolation not as conquerors, but as judges who had found the Empire guilty and were prepared to carry out whatever sentence they deemed appropriate. Scout Captain Bei Ji-hoon was patrolling the outer rim of Empire space when his instrument started showing readings that made no sense at all. His sensors detected ships that were not there, energy signatures that appeared for seconds before vanishing, heat sources that moved through space without any visible vessels casting them. At first, he thought his equipment was malfunctioning. The readings were too strange to be real. Ships appeared on his screen and then disappeared when he tried to get a closer look. Energy beams swept through space but came from empty vacuum. Gravitational distortions moved in patterns that suggested intelligent control but showed no source. Then his communications officer, Lieutenant Nam Jin-woo, received a priority alert from Empire Command. Scout fleets throughout the territory were reporting the same impossible readings. Unknown vessels were appearing everywhere at once, moving through Empire space like they owned it, surrounding key military installations and important colony worlds with perfect coordination. Captain Bei Ji-hoon realized with growing horror that the single alien ship that had destroyed 3 Empire cruisers had not been alone. It had been the scout for an entire fleet that was now revealing itself throughout Empire territory. These phantom ships had been watching and waiting and positioning themselves while the Empire prepared for battle. The coordination was perfect and terrifying. Every alien vessel had appeared at exactly the right place and time to maximum advantage. They surrounded military bases and colonies and trade routes in a pattern that showed they understood Empire strategy better than most Empire generals. The aliens had been studying their enemy for a long time. Lieutenant Colonel Park Soo-bin was analyzing the fleet positions from the war room deep inside Empire Command headquarters, and what she discovered made her hands shake with fear. The alien ships had positioned themselves to strike at every crucial target in Empire space simultaneously. They could cripple the Empire with a single coordinated attack. The Phantom Fleet had surrounded the shipyards where new vessels were built, the supply depots that fed the Empire military, the communication relays that held the Empire together, the government centers that controlled hundreds of worlds. Each alien ship was positioned to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. But the most frightening thing was how easily they had done it. These ships had moved through the most heavily defended space in the galaxy without triggering a single alarm. They had passed through sensor networks and patrol routes and defensive positions like they were not even there. The Empire security had been completely useless. Commander Han Jae-sung received orders to take his stealth squadron and gather intelligence on the alien fleet, but when his ships approached the nearest Phantom vessel, something impossible happened. The alien ship detected his supposedly invisible scouts and began pursuing them through the asteroid fields of the Cygnus system. The chase became a nightmare of impossible maneuvers and physics-defying turns. The alien ship moved through space like it was swimming through water instead of flying through vacuum. It changed direction without slowing down. It accelerated without engines. It seemed to predict where the Empire ships would go before they decided where to go. Han Jae-sung was the best pilot in the Empire fleet. He had never been caught by enemy ships. He had never failed a stealth mission. But this alien vessel was hunting his squadron like a predator that could see through all their tricks and technology. His stealth systems were useless. His speed was meaningless. His experience counted for nothing. One by one, his squadron ships were caught by beams of energy that paralyzed their systems without destroying them. The alien ship was capturing them alive for reasons that were more terrifying than simple destruction. The crews of the captured ships sent brief transmissions before their communications were cut off forever. The Phantom fleet was not just technologically superior, they were strategically brilliant. They had spent time learning Empire weaknesses and strengths. They had positioned themselves perfectly for victory. They had demonstrated that Empire defenses were meaningless against their capabilities. What made it worse was the realization that this had all been planned. The single ship that had first appeared had been testing Empire responses while the Phantom fleet moved into position. The aliens had never been in danger during that first battle. They had been collecting data and preparing for the real operation. The Empire faced an enemy that had been watching them for years, studying their tactics, memorizing their strategies, learning their weaknesses. The Phantom fleet was not reacting to Empire moves. They had anticipated everything and positioned themselves. Accordingly, this was not a battle. It was an execution that had been planned in advance. Captain Bae Ji-hoon managed to escape the alien ship that was hunting him, but barely. His vessel limped back to base with damaged engines and a crew that was shaking with terror. The Phantom fleet was real, and it was everywhere, and the Empire had no idea how to fight against enemies who could appear and disappear at will. The Empire military commanders realized they were facing something completely outside their experience. These were not just advanced aliens. These were beings who had turned warfare into a science so precise that the outcome was decided before the first shot was fired. The Phantom fleet had already won. The Third Fleet was still assembling for the Great Battle, but scouts were reporting that alien ships had appeared around that fleet as well. The Phantom vessels were watching the Empire's greatest military force with the same casual confidence they showed everywhere else. Victory was no longer possible. Only survival remained a question. Emperor Kang Do-hyun sat on his golden throne in the great palace on the capital world and listened to the battle reports with growing horror. 3 heavy cruisers destroyed, 6,000 of his best soldiers dead, an alien ship that could appear and disappear like a ghost, and weapons that could cut through the strongest armor ever made, like it was paper. The throne room was filled with his highest generals and admirals and scientists, but none of them had answers that made any sense. General Yoon Sung-min stood before the Emperor with data tablets and computer files, but his hands were shaking as he tried to explain what had happened in the battle. Your Majesty, the alien technology appears to operate on principles we do not understand, the general reported. Their weapons ignore our shields and armor completely. Their engines leave no energy signature we can detect. Their ship can vanish from our sensors while remaining visible to the naked eye, Captain. Shin-ha-na, the Empire's best expert on alien species, stepped forward with her own report, Emperor. She said, with a voice that was barely steady, "These beings may represent a civilization that has been watching our galaxy for thousands of years. The technology gap between us and them is larger than the gap between us and primitive Stone Age cultures. The Emperor felt something cold and ugly growing in his chest. The Valian Empire had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for 3 centuries. They had never met an enemy they could not defeat with bigger ships and more powerful weapons. But this alien vessel made their greatest achievements look like toys built by children. How many ships do they have? The Emperor demanded. Do they have fleets hidden throughout the galaxy? Are there more civilizations like them waiting to challenge us? Where did they come from and what do they want? None of his advisors could answer these questions. The alien ship had appeared without warning, struck without mercy, and vanished without explanation. They had no idea if it was alone or if it was just the first of many. They did not know if it represented a single species or an alliance of advanced civilizations. The Emperor stood up from his throne and his voice filled the great hall with the sound of absolute authority. Mobilize the entire Third Fleet, he commanded. Bring every ship, every weapon, every soldier we have. If these aliens want a war, they will face the full might of an empire that has conquered half the galaxy. General Yoon Sung Min looked uncomfortable as he received these orders. Your Majesty, he said carefully, the Third Fleet represents our largest military force. But if the alien technology is truly as advanced as it appears, then sending more ships may simply mean losing more ships. The Emperor turned to stare at the general with eyes that burned with anger. Are you suggesting that the mighty Valian Empire should surrender to a single alien vessel? Are you saying that we should abandon 3 centuries of conquest and expansion because one ship destroyed 3 of our cruisers? No, Your Majesty, the general replied quickly. But perhaps we should try to understand their technology before we engage in a larger battle. Perhaps we should attempt diplomatic contact or gather more intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. The Emperor sat back down on his throne and his voice became quiet and dangerous. There will be no diplomacy with aliens who dare to threaten the Empire. There will be no negotiation with creatures who destroy our ships without warning. We will mobilize every vessel we have, and we will show these aliens what happens to those who challenge Valian power. Within hours, the orders went out to every military base and shipyard in the Empire. The Third Fleet began assembling in the capital system. 57 of the most advanced warships ever built, including the new experimental dreadnoughts with weapons designed to crack open planets. The Emperor was preparing to demonstrate that no alien technology could stand against the concentrated might of an empire. But even as the great fleet gathered, Admiral Lee Jun-ho was receiving reports that made his blood turn cold. Long-range sensors were detecting anomalies throughout Empire space. Strange energy signatures that appeared and disappeared without pattern. Ships that registered on instruments for brief moments before vanishing completely, as if they had never been there at all. The alien vessel had not returned alone. It had brought friends, and they were already moving through Empire territory like ghosts studying Empire defenses and preparing for something that the Empire military could not predict. Or prevent the single ship that had destroyed 3 cruisers was no longer alone. Scout ships sent to investigate these anomalies either found nothing at all or simply stopped reporting back. Their crews vanished along with their vessels leaving. No trace except brief distress signals that cut off in the middle of transmission. The aliens were no longer content to observe from a distance. They were taking action. The Third Fleet was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled. But Admiral Lee Jun-ho was beginning to suspect that it would not be enough. These aliens had technology that operated beyond the laws of physics as the Empire understood them. They had demonstrated capabilities that suggested they were not just more advanced, but were playing an entirely different game. As the Emperor prepared for the greatest battle in Empire history, the aliens were already positioning themselves for victory in ways that the Empire could not detect or counter the Phantom. Ships were multiplying and surrounding and preparing to teach the Empire a lesson about the difference between ruling the weak and challenging the truly powerful. The alien ship had been watching them for 3 days when it finally decided to speak. Communications officer Choi Min-ah was monitoring all frequencies when her equipment suddenly came alive with a signal that should not have been possible. Transmission was coming through on their most secure military channels, using codes that only the highest-ranking Empire officials were supposed to know. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and cold and spoke perfect Valian language. Without any accent or mistake, the words hit the bridge crew like ice water poured over their heads. "We have been watching your empire for a very long time," the alien voice said with the kind of certainty that comes from absolute power. "Your expansion across the galaxy ends now." Admiral Lee Jun-ho felt his face turn red with anger. No alien species had ever dared to give orders to the Valian Empire. They had crushed every civilization that tried to resist them. They had burned worlds and enslaved entire populations to prove that the Empire was the strongest force in the galaxy. This single ship thought it could threaten them. "You will withdraw from all territories you have taken by force." The alien voice continued. "You will release all species. You have conquered and enslaved. You will return to your home system and never again leave it to bring harm to others. If you refuse these demands, you will face consequences that are beyond your ability to understand." The Admiral stood up from his command chair, and his voice shook with rage when he responded to the alien transmission. "You dare to threaten the Valian Empire? We have conquered half the galaxy. We have destroyed civilizations that were older and more advanced than you can imagine. Your single ship means nothing to us." The alien voice replied with something that might have been laughter, but it was cold and empty, like the sound of wind blowing through a graveyard. "You believe your empire is powerful because you have defeated species who had no real weapons. You think you are strong because you have conquered worlds that could not defend themselves. Today, you will learn the difference between ruling the weak and facing the strong admiral." Lee Jun-ho ordered his entire fleet to surround the alien vessel. 12 heavy cruisers moved into attack formation around the unknown ship. These were the most powerful warships the Empire had ever built. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. Each one had never been defeated in battle. The alien ship waited patiently while the Empire fleet surrounded it. The vessel made no attempt to escape or to call for help. It simply floated in space like it was waiting for something interesting to happen. The bridge crew of the Eternal Dominion watched their targeting computers finally lock on to the strange ship attack. The Admiral screamed, and 12 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy opened fire at the same time. Energy beams and missiles and plasma cannons all fired together in a display of destruction that should have turned the alien ship into scattered atoms. The space around the unknown vessel filled with light and fire and explosive energy. When the light faded, the alien ship was completely untouched. Not a single weapon had hit it. Not one energy beam had found its target. Every missile had passed through empty space, as if the ship was not really there at all. The Empire weapons had been firing at shadows and illusions, while the real ship watched from somewhere they could not detect. The alien vessel moved for the first time since the battle began. It glided forward with impossible smoothness, and 3 beams of pale blue light reached out toward the Empire ships. The beams looked thin and weak compared to the massive weapons the Empire had just fired. But when they touched the heavy cruisers, something terrible happened. The first ship simply came apart like it was made of sand. The hull cracked and split and fell away in pieces that dissolved into nothing. The second ship folded in on itself as if space was crushing it from all directions. The third ship flickered like a candle flame and then was gone, leaving not even debris behind. 9 Empire warships remained, and their crews stared in horror at where their companions had been just moments before. 3 of the most powerful ships ever built had been destroyed so easily that it looked like magic. The alien vessel had not even seemed to try very hard. Unknown ship began moving again, but this time, it was leaving. The vessel turned away from the remaining Empire fleet and accelerated toward the edge of the system. Within seconds, it was moving faster than anything the Empire had ever seen. Within minutes, it was gone, completely vanished into the darkness between stars. Admiral Lee Jun-ho stood on his bridge, surrounded by officers who were too shocked to speak. 3 ships and 6,000 crew members had been lost in less than 30 seconds. The alien vessel had demonstrated power that made the Empire look like children playing with broken toys. The most terrifying part was how casual the destruction had been. The alien ship had not used its most powerful weapons. It had not brought friends or called for backup. It had simply swatted aside 3 capital ships like they were annoying insects, and then left because it had finished making its point. The Empire had just experienced its first military defeat in over a century. They had encountered something that could destroy them without effort, and they had no idea how to fight back. The alien ship was gone, but its message was clear. The Empire was no longer the strongest force in the galaxy. Commander Park Hyun-woo felt his heart stop when he looked at his screen. The massive alien ship was there, floating in space like death itself. The ship was bigger than anything he had ever seen, and it was dark, so dark that it seemed to eat the light from the stars around it. The Valian Empire had ruled over 300 star systems for many years, but they had never seen anything like this before. The ship had appeared without any warning. Their best sensors had not detected it. Their most advanced warning systems had stayed silent. It was as if this mysterious vessel had simply stepped out of empty space and decided to visit their solar system. Lieutenant Kim. So Jin stood beside him, and her face was pale with fear. She kept staring at the readings on her computer screen, as if she could not believe what she was seeing. This was impossible according to everything they knew about space travel and technology. The alien ship was moving through their territory as if it owned every star, every planet, and every moon in the system. Admiral Lee Jun-ho had been fighting wars for 40 years. He had conquered dozens of weaker species and had never lost a single battle. But when he looked at this strange vessel, something cold and heavy settled in his stomach. The shape of the ship was wrong in ways that hurt to think about. It was long and curved like a blade, but also round in places that made no sense. The hull was not made of any metal they recognized. Instead, it looked like it was made from compressed shadows and starlight. The energy readings coming from the vessel were so high that their instruments kept breaking down and showing error messages. Park Hyun-woo tried to scan the ship with their most powerful sensors, but the beams seemed to slide off the hull without giving any useful information. It was like trying to grab water with bare hands. The alien vessel was there in front of them, but at the same time, it felt like it was somewhere else entirely. There. Targeting computers could not lock onto it. Their weapons systems showed red warning lights. The bridge crew of the Imperial Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, had seen many battles. They had watched planets burn and civilizations fall, but now they stood, in complete silence, staring at something that challenged everything they thought they knew about power and control in the galaxy. The Empire had always been the strongest force in known space. They had the biggest ships, the most powerful weapons, and the most advanced technology, but this single alien vessel made all of their achievements seem small and worthless. The ship was not just bigger or stronger than their ships. It was different in a way that suggested it came from a completely different level of existence. It moved through space without engines that they could detect. It generated power without reactors that they could identify. It existed without following the rules that governed every other ship in the galaxy Kim. So, Jin finally found her voice and reported what her sensors were telling her. The unknown ship was scanning their outer colonies, but not in any way they understood. The scan beams were invisible to their detection equipment, but somehow their colonies were reporting that they felt watched, observed, and measured by something vast and intelligent. The alien vessel seemed to be learning about them, studying their defenses, and mapping their territory with casual efficiency. It was not hiding what it was doing. Instead, it was acting like it had every right to examine their space and their people. Admiral Lee Jun-ho realized with growing horror that this ship was not asking for permission or negotiating for access. It was simply taking what it wanted. The most terrifying part was how effortless it all seemed. The ship moved between their defensive positions without any apparent concern for their weapons or their warnings. It treated their mighty fleet like obstacles that were barely worth noticing. Their communications attempts were ignored, not because the aliens could not understand them, but because they had nothing important enough to say. Park Hyun-woo watched the alien ship continue its survey of their system and felt something he had never experienced before in his military career. He felt small and helpless in the face of something that operated on a completely different level of capability. The Empire had built its power on being stronger, faster, and more advanced than everyone else they encountered. Now they were facing something that made them look like children playing with toys. The alien vessel finished its scan of the outer colonies and began moving toward their main defensive positions. Its movement was smooth and predatory, like a shark swimming through dark water. The ship seemed to know exactly where it was going and exactly what it would find when it got there. The bridge crew watched in fascination and terror as the mysterious vessel approached, their strongest fortifications. The ship showed no signs of slowing down or changing course. It was heading directly toward their most powerful weapons and their most experienced crews, as if it welcomed the opportunity to test their strength against. Its own Admiral Lee Jun-ho knew that everything was about to change. The Empire had ruled through fear and superior firepower for centuries. They had never met an opponent they could not defeat or a technology they could not overcome. But this dark ship floating through their space represented something entirely new and infinitely dangerous. The alien vessel had appeared like a phantom from empty space, and now it was moving through their territory with the confidence of an apex predator. The Empire was about to learn that no matter how powerful they thought they were, there was always something bigger and more dangerous swimming in the vast darkness between the stars. The discovery of this unknown ship would mark the end of everything. The Valian Empire thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. They had always been the hunters, but now they were about to become the prey. The final confrontation took place above the capital world, where Emperor Kang Do-hyun had assembled every warship the Empire could still operate. 312 vessels representing centuries of military construction and technological development floated in defensive formation around the most important planet in Empire space. The Third Fleet was there, along with the Home Defense Squadron and ships recalled from patrol duties throughout the galaxy. Every captain who had ever won a battle, every admiral who had ever conquered a world, every crew that had ever served with distinction was gathered for this ultimate test of Empire power. Against this massive display of military might, the humans sent exactly 12 ships. They appeared without warning in perfect formation just outside the range of the Empire's heaviest weapons. The human vessels looked small compared to the Empire dreadnoughts, but they radiated a confidence that made experienced officers feel like nervous children. Emperor Kang Do-hyun stood on the bridge of his personal flagship, the Eternal Glory, and stared at the human fleet through reinforced viewing ports. The human ships were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They seemed to be carved from crystallized starlight and moved through space with the fluid grace of living creatures. Admiral Sarah Chen. Voice came through the communication system one final time, and her words were addressed directly to the Emperor. You have assembled an impressive fleet, she said, with what might have been genuine appreciation. These ships represent the best your civilization has achieved, and the crews aboard them are brave warriors who deserve better leadership. The Emperor felt his rage boil over at this casual dismissal of his power. "You dare to mock the might of the Valian Empire," he screamed at the communications screen. "We have more ships than you can count. We have weapons that can crack planets. We have warriors who have never known defeat. Your warriors are indeed brave," Admiral Chen replied, "but bravery cannot overcome the fundamental laws of physics. Your weapons are powerful, but they cannot hit targets. They cannot detect. Your ships are well built, but they are designed to fight enemies who share your limitations. We do not share those limitations." The human fleet began to move, and their ships flowed through space like schools of fish swimming through deep ocean. The Empire targeting computers tried to lock onto the human vessels, but the targeting beams slid off their hulls without finding purchase. The human ships seemed to exist slightly outside normal space attack. Emperor Kang Do-hyun commanded, and 300 Empire warships opened fire simultaneously. The space between the two fleets filled with energy beams and missiles and plasma bolts in a display of firepower that should have sterilized several star systems. The Empire had never before fired so many weapons at the same time. The human response was immediate and devastating. 12 beams of pale blue energy reached out from the human ships and touched the Empire vessels wherever they made contact. Empire ships simply stopped working. Their engines shut down. Their weapons went silent. Their shields collapsed. Their life support systems failed. The Empire crews found themselves floating helplessly in space inside ships that had become nothing more than metal coffins. The human weapons had not destroyed the Empire vessels. They had simply turned them off, like someone flipping light switches. The technology gap was so vast that the Empire ships had been neutralized without being damaged. The human ships began collecting Empire crew members using technology that made no sense, according to everything. The Empire knew about physics. People were transported from their disabled ships to the planet's surface without any visible transportation devices. They simply disappeared from their vessels and reappeared on the ground below. Colonel Nam Woo-jin found himself standing on the palace landing platform, along with thousands of other Empire officers who had been in command of the Great Fleet moments before. The human ships hung in the sky above them like impossible dreams made real. Their hulls reflected the light of the capital world's sun in patterns that shifted and changed like living things. The surrender negotiations began immediately, but they were not really negotiations at all. The humans presented terms that were not open for discussion or modification. The Empire would accept human oversight, or the Empire would cease to exist. The choice was simple, and the consequences of choosing wrongly were made very clear. The terms were harsh but not cruel. The Empire would dismantle its military forces and release all conquered species. The Empire would return stolen territories and pay compensation for damages caused during centuries of expansion. The Empire would accept human monitoring of their government and their policies for as long as the humans deemed necessary. Emperor Kang Do-hyun tried to argue and negotiate, but Admiral Sarah Chen cut him off with words that left no room for misunderstanding. The time for negotiation ended when you chose to build an empire on the suffering of innocent species, she said with calm finality. You will accept our terms, or you will be removed from power and replaced by leaders who understand the value of peace. The transformation of the Empire began that very day. Human ships appeared at every military installation throughout Empire space. Empire soldiers found their weapons disabled and their orders countermanded by humans who had been monitoring their communications for years. The transition from empire to reformed civilization happened so smoothly that it seemed like it had been planned for decades. Within weeks, the first conquered species were being freed and returned to their home worlds. Empire colonies that had been built on stolen land were were evacuated and returned. To their original inhabitants, worlds that had been strip-mined for Empire benefit began receiving aid and technology to repair the environmental damage. The humans worked with efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. They knew exactly which Empire policies needed to be changed and exactly how to implement those changes. They had detailed plans for reforming Empire society that took into account cultural factors and economic realities that Empire leaders had never considered. What surprised everyone was how reasonable the humans were when they were not being threatened. They provided food and medical care for Empire citizens who had been displaced by the changes. They offered education and job training for Empire soldiers, who no longer had military careers. They treated former enemies with fairness and respect, but they also made it clear that their patience had limits. When some Empire generals tried to organize resistance movements, the human response was swift and final. The rebels simply disappeared along with all their equipment and supporters. No violence was used, but the message was unmistakable. Resistance was not an option. The phantom ships that had appeared throughout Empire space became permanent guardians. Watching over the transformation process, they monitored Empire communications, observed Empire activities, and intervened whenever anyone tried to return to the old ways of conquest and oppression. Dr. Lim Young-soo spent his time studying the human technology that was being used to reform Empire society, and the more he learned, the more amazed he became. The humans had not just developed better weapons and faster ships, they had created an entire civilization based on principles that the Empire had never considered. Human society was built around cooperation instead of domination. Their technology was designed to create abundance rather than scarcity. Their government was focused on protecting the weak rather than empowering the strong. Everything about human civilization was the opposite of everything the Empire had believed was natural and necessary. The lesson was clear to everyone who witnessed these events. The Valian Empire had thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy, but they had been nothing more than bullies picking on species who could not fight back. When they finally encountered true apex predators, they had been defeated so completely that resistance was not even possible. Humanity had emerged from their long isolation not to conquer, but to establish justice. They had the power to destroy civilizations, but they chose instead to reform them. They had the technology to rule the galaxy, but they preferred to guide it toward peace and cooperation. The Empire that had once seemed invincible learned that in the vast cosmos there were always bigger fish swimming in deeper waters, and sometimes those fish decided that bullies needed to be taught lessons that they would never forget. The age of Empire expansion was over, and the age of human guidance had begun. The phantom ships continued to patrol Empire space, ensuring that the transformation remained permanent. The humans had demonstrated that they could appear anywhere at any time, and that no military force could stand against them. The Empire was now part of a larger galactic community that operated under human protection. Years later, when former Empire citizens looked back at the confrontation, they realized that the humans had shown remarkable restraint. They could have destroyed the Empire completely, but instead, they had chosen to save it from itself. The Phantom Fleet had been an instrument of justice rather than revenge. The galaxy was a safer place, because humanity had finally decided to take an active role in maintaining peace. The Empire learned to live without conquest and discovered that cooperation could be more rewarding than domination. The humans had taught them that true strength came from protecting others, rather than destroying them. The unknown vessel that had first appeared like a phantom had indeed vanished before the Empire could counterattack, but it had.